Greetings, programs, and welcome back to the TV thing. And today I'm covering Designated Survivor, which is an ABC show which has then come onto Netflix. Now, this has, just looking at the Wikipedia page, been commissioned for a second season earlier this month, like 2 weeks ago, something like that, so really not long ago at all. And I was honestly a little bit surprised because I didn't think it was that good, to be honest. And it also seems like a bit of a gap since the airing of it originally on TV last year. I don't know if that's a usual thing for US TV to have that big of a gap before they decide if they're going to recommission or not. But in this case, they have. I'm not entirely sure I will sit down and watch that second season if and when it comes to Netflix, though. I might do, just to see how it plays out. But overall, it wasn't great. It really wasn't. And I don't mean that it was a bad show. It's certainly watchable. But my main criticism would be it's just painfully conventional. It doesn't really ever do anything surprising. In fact, a lot of what it does, it telegraphs so heavily that you can pretty much guess what's coming if you're paying attention. There were a couple of times when that wasn't true. There were a couple of moments that I did genuinely enjoy. But for the most part, any kind of enjoyment from this show really has to come from the performances of the cast. And even then, the writing and the dialogue were not all that consistent. So it's got Kiefer Sutherland in the main role, and the setup is basically that there's this massive act of terrorism where during the US State of the Union, where members from all branches of the government gather together in the Capitol building, it gets blown up. And so the designated survivor, who is in this case the Housing and Urban Development Secretary, who, well, there's a little sort of twist earlier on where you kind of learn something about him, and I immediately thought of Battlestar Galactica, but I won't say what it was because it was like, okay, that's set the tone, I know what's going to come now, and oh look, here's this predictable thing that's happened. So, yeah, he ends up becoming the president because everybody else has been blown up, essentially. And it then turns into this slightly awkward, bifurcated plot structure where, on the one hand, you've got all the political stuff going on with President Tom Kirkman, as he now is, trying to put together the government again. And some of that was actually quite interesting. But there's also the investigation of what turns out to be a massive conspiracy, and that really does take over the plot in the latter half of the series. It basically all more or less becomes about the conspiracy stuff and unraveling it and figuring out what's going to happen next. So there were some genuinely quite good moments, especially in the final episode of the first season. Kirkman makes this quite well-delivered speech, or well, I should say Kiefer Sutherland makes this quite well-delivered speech, which was, I thought, actually rather well done. But overall, it's so unsurprising. You know, you just kind of, if you've watched any of these thrillers or read any thrillers or whatever, and have any kind of memory of, you know, the kind of twists and turns that can come along, it just plays into all the tropes, or so it feels like. And so there were just so many moments where it was like, no, surely they're not going to do this totally obvious thing. Surely they're not going to, oh, yes, they did. Yes, okay, there we go. So I did slap my face with my hand a couple of times just to, you know, or slap my face, you know, put my head in my hands. That's what I mean. It's an odd way of expressing it. And it was just because it was so conventional and it was so predictable, and that really is the biggest flaw of this show. I mean, it's not to say it doesn't have other flaws as well. They did have a couple of the more interesting characters that were honestly completely underused. Principal of whom is actually Kirkman's wife, as played by Natasha McElhone, who's a very good actress. but she really didn't have a lot to do. There was a whole other side of the plot, a plot strand, if you like, I guess, where they tried to do a bit of character development and a bit of drama with Kirkman's own family, and to give some sense of the massive shift that they've just undergone, because suddenly they're the first family, and the circumstances that have led into that have been completely unprecedented. But that, they really didn't go into it very far, and that all just ended up sort of fizzling out. And although the actors that they have for the rest of the family, I thought were quite good. Again, we had some of that in the earlier part of the series, and then the last maybe half of the series, it felt like, or maybe that's a bit hyperbolic, maybe it wasn't quite that much, but the last, say, I don't know, third, that just was not really there at all, and you get them wheeled out from time to time just to remind you that he has a family, but there's no real development going on, so that was all a bit of a waste as well. So there's stuff to enjoy here, but it's like, if you want an actual proper plot twisty turny conspiracy thriller stuff, or show rather, then Homeland is so much better. If you want something with big explosions and government toppling conspiracies, Jericho was actually all right. I mean, Jericho had a completely different focus, but I was sort of hoping for something maybe closer to Jericho in terms of the quality of the writing and the quality of the plotting, but just didn't happen. And then inevitably also I have to bring the West Wing in, because it sort of wanted to be the West Wing in some ways as well, with Kirkman being this very idealistic, well, we're going to do it my way, and through the power of amazing writing, somehow it just kind of works out for him, strangely enough. So this is a hard one to recommend, honestly. I think for most people you could easily skip this, because it's not that good, and unless the second season is somehow dramatically better, I can't see wanting to recommend that to people either. But I'll probably give it a go if and when it arrives. It didn't feel like a total waste of time. I was able to enjoy it sufficiently to stick with it through to the end, but I was also putting my head in my hands over the complete obvious conventionality and the adherence to the tropes all the way through to the end as well. I did wonder, by the way, this is just a complete aside, that I did wonder how much this was inspired by a plot point in one of Tom Clancy's novels, because those of you that have read Tom Clancy extensively will know that I think it's at the end of one novel that leads into directly another novel, where basically the same thing happens, and it's like an airliner gets flown into the Capitol building and wipes out the government in much the same way as happens in the first episode here, and suddenly Jack Ryan becomes the president somehow. It's not even a particularly original concept for a show. It's been done before, but they went with a rather different direction than whatever that novel was called. I can't remember which one it was now. One of Tom Clancy's many paper bricks. So that's Designated Survivor. It was a bit meh. Can't really recommend it, but if you like Kiefer Sutherland, it might be worth a go. And if you liked this this overview of it, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.